So around Samach Amid Aleph, near the bottom, the Mishnah. So we completed our discussion last week about question. Again, this is all business practices, diluting wine, and grain, and what you can do. Again, this is all consistent with the Gemara sort of giving us a primer on what is considered acceptable business practices. So now we have this last Mishnah in Hazov. So the Mishnah says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer. And now, before we get all excited about this, just take a pause. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, L'yichalek hachedvini kloyos ve'egozim l'tanukos. A storekeeper should not distribute grain. It was like, I guess they had grains and nuts to children. Now, this practice has been going on for generations, where you come into a store. I remember we had such a thing as a candy store before the drugstores and everybody else took over. We had a candy store. We went into the candy store, and Yussel, the candy man, we bought nuts and different things, and he would give us a candy or give us something. So that was kind of routine. So here comes Rabbi Yehuda and says that's usher, that he cannot give sweets or to the children. Why? Because he's giving them candy, he'll cause them to come to him to buy rather than somebody else. So, in other words, he'll have the edge. Of course, someone else can do the same thing, mind you, but he has the edge because he is treating these children, and when the mother or the father sends them to the store, they'll naturally go to this store because they'll buy what the parent wants, and then they'll get a candy on the side. So it's a very interesting dynamic here that Rabbi Yehuda makes this statement. Now, of course, the Chachamim Matirin, the Chachamim Amatir, that's the halacha. But still, to understand what's Rabbi Yehuda's thinking, why he's saying that, okay, we're going to see in a minute why the Chachamim say Matir. Again, because it doesn't preclude anybody else from doing the same thing. You're not, okay, there's such a thing as a sagas kavul. Okay, you can't step over someone's territory, someone's boundary. It's the in terms of business. Okay, and that's you have to be very careful with that, because that has a lot of nuances to it. But at the same time, anything that you induce someone to buy, says the Chachamim say that's completely mutter, because it's an open. You don't have a corner on that market. That market is open to everybody. So by doing that, you're saying, okay, I want business, but at the same time, says the Chachamim, everybody else can do the same. Now, the next step is so he shouldn't. Again, this is anathema to our thinking, but he should not. And again, this is Rabbi Yehuda. He shouldn't lower the prices below what is the market. In other words, what do we call that? A discount, a deep discount. So he said you can't deep discount, because if the market says something should be $10, you can't charge $8, $8.50, because again, you're going to disadvantage the others. And the Chachamim say, not only is it okay, but Zachur Latoiv, he will be remembered for good. Why will he be remembered for good? Because if a storekeeper leads the charge to lower prices, he isn't doing it to lose money. What he's winding up doing is that the whole chain of sales will have to adjust. So, in other words, he buys his goods, say, for $8 and sells it for $10. Now he's selling it for $8.50. So he's making far less, but he's put the pressure will push the wholesaler to reduce it from 8 to maybe 7 or 6. So that's why he says Zohur Latoiv, because this only benefits the consumer. And that's where, at the end of the day, that's who we're most concerned with, the rabbin.
But Rabbi, we learned before about Anah that it was either up or down, that you couldn't increase or decrease the price below the 1 cent.
Well, yeah, but if he increases the price, nobody else does. He won't sell anything. It's when he discounts that people will start coming to him, and then there'll be a chain reaction.
But I don't understand. It was usher before to do either one, either increase or decrease below the market level by 1/6 or 1/5. Well, let's say it's 1/6.
Oh, you're talking about no, yeah, about no, right.
So how is this now? It's really basically saying, oh no, it doesn't matter. You can discount even higher than the limitation. So how does that reconcile with the concept of no?
Right, no, that's a good question. So no basically means that you can't sell something for, okay, but let's be careful. With no, the storekeeper or the person selling can't sell it more than 1/6, and a buyer should not knowingly pay more than 1/6 less than the value. That's what no is, okay?
And what we're talking about because we have a recourse to reconcile that and make it whole.
Correct. What we're talking about here is a seller voluntarily, not because he intentionally or he makes a mistake. He voluntarily says, my new price is not $10, it's now $8.50. So he's the chenveni. If that's the case, then Michael, how can you ever change prices up or down? I mean, in the business,
change, but not within. I mean, there was a established market price, and that was how it was set. So right. You're implying that no was in the case of duress, which it's not. You said voluntarily, so that was voluntary too, where he could jack up the price either 1/6 up or reduce it 1/6 down, which is a discount. And
no. Okay, I see what you're asking. So in the case of no, if the market price was $10 and he charged 15, then of course there's no. He violates no. But to this particular person, he's going to charge 15, and to everybody else, he's going to charge 10. In other words, the reason why it's no is because he is deviating from the established price, not changing the established price. He's deviating from the established price and charging this particular person more, or even multiple people more. But when the seller voluntarily says, you know what, that price was the wrong price because, in other words, I can't survive at $10. I must charge $12.50. Now he charges $12.50, and then he sells it to someone for 15, which let's say it's less than a 6. For argument's sake, that's not no, because the established price is the base for which no is calculated. So from time to time, a seller changes entirely the price. Not that he's charging you more than he would charge someone else, and if he charges you more, that's no. But as a matter of course, a seller is allowed to change his prices to adjust for inflation or because.
Let's look at the price of eggs. In a matter of weeks, it went from $2 to $2.50 to $3
to the market adjusted, right?
So Michael,
right? But the first person to adjust, it might have been more than a 6 because all of a sudden his stuff changed, but everybody else changed very quickly too.
Right. So that's a good point. So Michael, if the price of eggs went to $8.99 from $2.99, and then he charges, even if he charges $10, which by the way they do because the prices are crazy, that's not then there's no. There's no.
But that's because there's an established price. This established price. I mean, so there we established that's a whole mechanism for reining in, whether it's voluntary. I mean, that was presumably voluntary. It didn't matter if it was to one person or multiple people.
Right.
We have the concept of no. And here somebody comes along and says, Rabbi Yehuda says that, okay, if he wants to discount 25%, that's okay because he voluntarily did it. That just undermines the whole concept of no to me.
Well, okay. So, I mean, price prices adjusted all the time. So you
Yeah,
can't.
but to market, I mean, that's why
No,
that's why we went
if
through
the
all that
market
about
is,
oh no, because
yeah,
we
but Michael, if
established.
the market is at a certain number and you overcharge from that number, that's I know. But
But
if
it's oh
you
no the
change,
other way too if you
no, but
discount below that.
if you change the underlying market, you say the price is no longer 10, it's now 15, then if I charged 16, I certainly would be over a no at 10, but I'm not over a no at 15
Well,
because
right, because that's what ONA
yeah,
does. So if the market changes, the established market moves, and then everybody can, then the 1/6 up and down moves with it. So now we're saying
so,
out
so
of the blue that somebody comes along and gives a discount that, let's say, for whatever reason they want, that's, let's say, 25% below the established market price, he can do it, which to me throws all the foundation we laid away.
yeah. Well, again, what I could say is that I know is price cheating or taking advantage within a sixth or more than a sixth of whatever the established price is. That's
But
I
it's
know,
more or less, Rabbi, correct?
or less, 100%.
So if
This,
somebody wants to corner the market on volume because they can go
then
down
they can't. That's not I
4%,
know. That's not I know.
that's oh no, according to if there's an
No, no, no,
established
no.
market.
No, that's not a no. A no is when you have a price and then I charge you more than a sixth of that price, or I
But it's
charge you and Jay and Menashe, but my price still is that established price. Then you can measure the price and what you're selling it for and say it's a no. But now I'm making a change entirely. I have either I have a windfall and I can lower the price, or my price increase and I have to raise the price. And the new existing price to everybody in the world is now different than it was before. So you can't say that's I know if it's more than a sixth or I know if it's less than a sixth.
So if it's not market, so let's say somebody is trying to do high volume and
Right,
the margin is much less, but the idea is I'm going to try to pull in all the business
right,
because I lower it. You say he establishes a price that
right,
is lower. Let's say it was, a gallon of gas was 3.50 a gallon, and he sets it at $1.99. And so if he sets that price and it's his regular price that he charges to everyone, that's not ONA, even though it's well below
correct,
1/6 of the market. So as
correct,
long as he sets that price as his regular price,
correct.
now, but that can't be for a day or two.
What it can be for any amount of time, correct. Right. So if you paid 250 when the price was 199, that's a no. Of course, that's a no. But if
But
his
his
price
price is
changes
199.
tomorrow,
The market is $3. So Um, so, so he is not guilty of ONA if he says this is this is my advertised price, $1.99.
correct,
He can go
correct,
down that low regardless, and it's not ONA as long as that's the established price.
right? Because the Gemara and no halacha dictates the in the business world how you should price. In other words, I'm a more expensive dealer than you. I can buy a Volkswagen for 25,000 and I can buy a Tesla for 50,000. So is the guy who's selling a Tesla over I
Yeah, but they're
know
different
because someone else?
products. They're different products. So we're talking about same grades, but
Okay,
I can't
yeah, but they're
set my
both,
price
no,
at
I'm saying they're both
450.
cars. They're both cars. But yeah, I get the point.
But
So
but I can't set my price at 450, even if that's my regular price, because that violates ONA because it's above. Is that right?
if I'm selling you something that I would sell to the public for a different number, that's I know.
Okay, but if it's this, if I say my gas price is 450 in my example, where the market is $3, and you got this guy on the other corner selling for $1.99, that's his established price, and another guy goes to 450, is that ONA, or because he's established that for everyone, it's not ONA?
Once you establish it for everyone, it's not I know.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. Okay, so in other words, we see here, the Chacham says because why? Because as a result of him lowering the price, it'll help the entire chain of goods to be repriced, and that will help the general public. So you see the Chachamim who we hold like, we paskin like, that they have a much more open and I would say lenient, but a much more malleable position than Rabbi Yehuda, who right away looks to Aser and says that you can't do things that will make. In other words, he's much more rigid. That if everybody was selling at a certain price, and then you give the candies to the kids, and so now they will come to you. But that doesn't change the fact that everybody can do the same thing. In other words, if you corner the market and do something improper, okay, maybe we can say that you shouldn't do it. But when you're doing something to entice people to come to you, you put a big sign in your store, clearance, the guy down the street has the choice of putting the sign clearance too. So you can't force this guy not to do something because it'll affect someone else who has a brera to do the same thing. That's the general rule that the Chachamim say is we impose, and therefore they take this position. Now, so this is obvious things. Now let's talk about something a little bit more subtle. Says the Mishnah, back, those days, I don't know if they do that, is they would have a barrel full of beans, and they would sell beans. So what would they do? They would, the beans have a skin, I guess, on them that has to be removed. So, so this fellow is now, the storekeeper saying, you know what? I can sell beans at $2 a pound. If I sift them and I clean them up, I can charge $4 a pound because I did the work, and you're buying a bean that you no longer have to clean up. So the question becomes, for the buyer who was buying these beans at $2 a pound and doing the work, is the work the storekeeper did, is that worth $2 a pound? Is it worth to pay $2 a pound more because the storekeeper cleaned the beans instead of you cleaning the beans? That's really what this shaila is.
Well, I don't understand the question.
Okay. In other words, the common practice was to sell beans in the way you pick them or whatever natural condition. You brought them home, you have to start cleaning them, and peeling them, and doing all kinds of things. Right. Okay. But you bought the beans at $2 a pound. So the storekeeper says, you know what, I'm going to make a better profit if I clean them myself.
Right.
And instead of selling them for $2 a pound, I'll sell them for $4 a pound.
Which is the labor difference.
Which is the labor.
Well, wait a minute, Rabbi, is the $4 a pound for it before he cleaned them?
Or no, after. No, once he cleaned them, then he puts them back.
So you're getting more beans for the $4 a pound because a pound of
but only a little
beans
bit. It's not
as big has more weight, and you're not getting as much bean as you are. So it's not only the labor, you're getting more content, more product,
more usable
for the $4.
But it's not as big not as dramatic a difference as between.
He starts with a fixed weight amount, and when you're cleaning him, they may get less.
No. That's
correct. It's got to be a little bit less.
Nobody wants that extra stuff that comes off.
Correct.
It's subjective about the $2 a pound because the labor that's involved in it is boiled into it, but included in that is a weight difference. Because if I understood, Rabbi,
okay, I hear your point. But let's say the weight difference is de minimis. Okay, you're right, but let's put that.
I think that's the key here: is that the weight difference is de minimis as opposed to, say, when you're taking wheat that was just harvested, and by the time you get rid of the chaff and you get the kernels out, and then you grind them up and make flour. It's entirely different in terms of the weight and the volume from what the original stuff was.
Right,
Here, it's a much
right.
smaller difference.
So, Michael, let's take the weight out of the equation for a minute. He can sell the beans for $2 a pound. His labor, in real terms, let's say his labor is worth $1. Let's say it's worth $1. So then he does the work, and instead of charging $3 a pound, he charges $4 a pound. Is that deceptive? Is he now deceiving the public because he is charging more to get the new product on the shelf than he should if he sold the old product? So in other words, there is a deceptive practice here that he's doing because he's marking it up more than it should be because of the labor. That's what the kasha in the Mishnah is.
But actually, Rabbi, the labor becomes a second item that he's buying. And the labor now has the question of whether or not he's jacking it up too high.
Right.
Instead of $1 to clean the beans, the same volume, he's charging double or something.
But here's the other
thing. There's two separate purchases here. One is a service, the labor, and one is the actual product itself, the raw product that he harvested.
So, but he doesn't give you a choice anymore. He's no longer selling beans that have the skin on them. He's now only selling a new class of beans, which is beans that have, right. But now the price jumped from 2 to 4.
The rabbi, he has the option of going to another seller that sells it.
Sells the raw beans.
So if that, if he doesn't think it's worth that, he has the option to go to another seller and buy it from them.
The other thing is that there's bulk involved. So when somebody's going ahead and has an employee, run all the beans through big pots and big machines and everything else, even though the owner of the business is making profit, significant profit in this case, on that labor and by building it into the sale price. But for an individual who's got to deal with one small container of beans and they got to clean the equipment and this and that and back and forth. So relatively speaking, it can actually be it can be very cost effective to be paying somebody else $2 to do it rather than doing it yourself, even though it's not that much labor.
Yeah. So I hear your point. Okay, you can go to someone else. Let's say he's in a one-horse town and he's the only seller and you have no braver. Take a look at Rashi, about 4 lines from the bottom, where Rashi says, "Lo yavros apsilis," 4 lines. The fish mitoch sheniras yofos, because they appear more attractive, they're nicer looking because they have the skin taken off. Humala al demehem harbe midmei hapsoilus shenotel mehem. He's charging more than the amount of the psolos that he's taking away. So there is the question whether or not that is considered an improper business practice, because everybody knows that when you take off the skins and you clean up the beans, that there is a value in that labor, but he's taking advantage of that labor by doubling the price, and that's the machlokes. So Abba Shol says in the Mishnah that you can't do it. Okay, so but Michael, the Chachamim matirim, the Chachamim are matir for the very reasons that you're saying. Okay, so we'll have to understand the Gemara a little bit more, but why are they matir? Because again, I don't want to get ahead of the Gemara, but the fact of the matter remains that the Chachamim are always a little bit more liberal about what a person can do when he sells goods. Let's wait till the Gemara to fully understand the Chachamim's view, but there is a machlokes as to whether or not you're right. If there are other places that can be that he can access, then he can do what he does, and he'll realize that he's made a mistake, and he will lower his price to what it should be for having done the labor. But here he's taking advantage of the public by doubling the price of the labor when he should have sold it without the labor, and people would do their own work and it would be cheaper. In any event, we'll explain that in a couple of minutes. Umodim, the Rabbanan who are matir, they agree, shelo yover ma'al pi megura. Okay, now this is clearly a business practice, a deceptive practice, that he cannot clean or sift the beans from on top of the bin and not do it all the way through. This is the practice of, when you show your product and the product looks very attractive because the product that you made attractive sits on top of a lot of other product that isn't attractive. That's clearly a deceptive business practice. If you were to clean the whole bin, you could say, okay, but what you're going to do is, oh, that's a nice thing. I'll pay the extra. You then take the beans and you put it into his sack, and you're taking beans that haven't been cleaned, that haven't been, sifted, and you're including that in the higher price. That's what the Chacham Mamodeh, that if you clean the beans and every bean is the same, fine, I'm okay. But you can't Shaloyaver Ma'alpi Bagura, for just from the top of the barrel or the top of the opening of the bin, whatever you have. She'ena ella kagoinev esa'ayin. This is known as Genevas Das, because you're deceiving the customer because he's thinking that the entire barrel, he's not even looking. When you take that what do you call it, that shovel that you go into the bin and you pick up all these beans and you put them into the thing, he's not even seeing that half the beans or more have the skin on them.
That's why when you go to a store, you see how women purchase fruit. They're not just simply taking the stuff off the top. They're going deeper to see whether it's better or worse as you go down into the. Yeah, sure. You see it with every woman does that.
Because for the most part, what's on top is the most attractive. And if it's attractive all the way down, it's okay. But if it's
the top stuff, the top has been handled by everybody. The minute you go deeper, there's fewer people that have touched it.
That too, right? So they handle it, so they want to touch it. But let's say it has skin on it, so it doesn't matter. You're not talking about an apple that you eat, but let's say you're talking about a banana or an orange, where with the skin, which you would peel anyway. It's still not proper to show your best product on top and then leave the silas or the less attractive product down the bottom. That's a deceptive practice. Okay. Now, the final piece of the Mishnah, very interesting, ein mefartikin. So this is a general rule, and we'll see how it plays out to us, that you cannot beautify, enhance the appearance of an item. We'll see what the Mishnah says. You can't enhance the appearance of an item in order to make it more attractive when in fact underneath it's not. Now look what it goes to. Lo es ha'adam. You can't enhance and beautify a person. We'll see what that means in a minute. Lo es ha'behema. Lo es ha'kelim. Now, when they used to sell slaves, they used to put them on the market, right? And I'm told that people would evaluate the slave. They'd open his mouth, look at his teeth. I mean, they would certainly do things that we wouldn't consider appropriate. So what does he do? He beautifies him, right? If he's starting to get gray, he dyes his hair. He does things so that the slave should be more attractive to the buyer. Same with the behemoth. You can beautify a behemoth. We'll see again what the Gemara says, but you can make a behemoth more attractive by doing things to it. Below is a kalim and not the kalim. So the first thing that came to my mind was these artificial dyes, right? It's a big controversy because they're unhealthy. But you dye food if it's red, you dye it to make it more red, or you dye it to make it more yellow, because you want to enhance its appearance. So someone will say, "Oh, this is a really nice apple, or a really nice whatever." So that's deceptive, because it really isn't that. So by beautifying it, you're deceiving the public. And again, this whole thing has to do with how the public perceives your business dealings. And this is a primer on how we should behave when we have a business. Okay, so Rashi says, "Limker bezul," to sell it cheaper, because they will come to him and he will take the mizonos, the sustenance from his friend. But we've already talked about that why the Chacham say it's mutter is because it's an open market. If he corners the market and he does something improper, we have a taina on him. But in an open market, say the Chachamim, the fact that you undersold or gave candies to a child or something of that nature isn't in itself is not in and of itself an isser, because it certainly allows everybody else to do the same thing. Zachor toiv. What do we say that if you lower the price, the Chachamim says Zachor tov. So look, Rashi says Shemitov K Otsrei Peres Mokin Bezul. The wholesalers will have to sell cheaper. If everybody's selling cheaper, they're going to put a pressure up the chain that you have to give us a better price. Otherwise, we're going to go to another wholesaler. We're going to find another buyer. So he has to lower his price. So it helps the public. Reason, Poland Garsos Perichayim Achas Lishtayim. And so Greason, again, here he's saying that with the beans, that you put them into the rechaim, into the grinder, and you take off the skin and take off everything else to make it better. The Yavras Apsoilus, the Rashi we just said, the Fish Metorch Sheniris Yofos, Umal al Demeim Harbe, it may Apsoilos Shenotel Behem. That's the issue, is because he's going to, not because he's going to raise the price because of the work he did, but he's going to double the price or more. So in other words, it should go to 2 to 3, not 2 to 4 or 2 to 5, whatever. But Matirim, Tama Mafarish Gemara. We're going to get a better feel for that in the Gemara. Modim say the Gemara says Shalayoba Mal Minora. The Chachamim agree. Lamala Laharis Yafais Vesapsila Shebetoicha Lo Bira. In other words, he didn't take out the psilas, he just beautified what was on top of it. If you say that, again, we're talking about in the barrel, you sift and every bean becomes you skin every bean. Okay, that's okay. But if you don't, if you just skim the top, that's deceptive. Also, Umodim. Okay, now here, Umodim. The Chachamim admit Shloyavar Mal Pi Hamgara Lamala Laharis Yafes Sepsilis Shibitocho Lo Bira. That to enhance the beauty of what he is selling. Lefisha Ella Gainivasadas Bebrera. I'm sorry, they still dealt with the battle. So the Chachamim say that he should not. The Chachamim admit again he can do the labor and increase the price. The Chachamim say it's okay. What he can't do, and the Chachamim agree that he can't do, is he can't just sift the top and not the bottom, and thereby sell everything at that higher price, even the psilos. That's what Rashi is saying here. He wasn't mavara. He didn't separate what was on the bottom, only on the top. Okay, because it's going of das. Okay, the aim of Farsikim first the Gemara. The Gemara will explain Lo Adam Evet Kanani here Omid Libka. He gives an example of an Evet Kanani, which we said that when you sold an Eved, then you beautify him to make him look, whatever people will pay for a better slave, and that's deceiving the public. Okay, fine. Now,
make it about 12:30.
Okay, strike the Gemara. My time of the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan were lenient in a number of these cases, and we have to understand why. My time of the Rabbanan. What was the reason that the rabbis did it? The Omalei. And this is exactly what I think all of you were saying. The Omalei, because the storekeeper, the Chenvini, who's giving the treats, who's doing all this, and he's saying, Ana maflaga am guze, va'at palge shiske. Okay, so in other words, even better. I'm giving nuts, and I'm giving whatever he was giving before to the kids, grains and nuts. That was the treat. That's what I'm doing. You could do me one better. But palgeshoiske, you can distribute them, and Rashi says, Shensky is prunes. He said, you can give out prunes. They'll come to you because prunes are better than nuts. So in other words, that's the answer we were discussing, that it's an open competition. I don't have a corner on the market. So the reason why the Chacham say it's matir is because that's open competition. I'm not doing anything improper. You have the choice to either match me or exceed what I'm doing, and you'll get the business. So that's the seichel of the Chacham. Okay. Now the next case is the lo yifches shar. He shouldn't lower the price, and the Chacham says why is that okay? What? So the Chacham say matirin, my tamid derabbanan. So what's the reason of the rabbis when they say that it's okay to lower the price? So it says the Gemara, again, because it's the public that we're most concerned about. Because if you give relief, look at the top Rashi on Samach Amid Beis, Mishum Demar V'Tara, V'Oitre Peris Yiru Shehazula V'Yimkru B'Zol. So, in other words, it's all about buying and selling, the market fluctuation price. And we know that even on the stock market or in other places, when prices go up, okay, then I mean there is a ripple effect, because if I'm the middleman and I'm selling to you at a higher price, then you have to sell to the public at a higher price. If I'm the middleman and someone gives me a discount and I don't pass it on, then it may come back to hurt me because someone else will pass it on, right? So setting the price becomes very, very important. Now, Michael, to your point, once you set the price, then I know it kicks in. But when you're negotiating what price should be the correct price, then the fact that you're increasing it by more than a sixth isn't I know, because that's what the market is dictating, either one way or the other, up or down. So what we see from this is that the pressure of pricing will ultimately determine the right price, and it'll come out that the public will not be hurt. And Menashe gave the example of eggs. I mean, if the price of eggs across the board becomes quadruple, then A, you can't say that's I know, and B, that's now the price. Now, I went into a store, and one store was selling eggs for $6.99, and another was selling it for $8.99, and Trader Joe's was selling it for $2.79. So everybody would flock to Trader Joe's because they didn't mark it up substantially. So
except that you could only buy 1 dozen at Trader Joe's.
What's that?
Except that you could only buy 1 dozen at Trader
Only buy 1 dozen, right? But the point is that each individual seller has to make that determination, and once he does it, then that's the price. Then I know it kicks in from there, but you can't make the wholesale changes of prices from the Chenveni. And also, I know really deals in situations where a person doesn't know that he's over or underpaid. He doesn't know it. He doesn't know that the market price is 5 and I'm going to pay 8. Or
See, Rabbi, here we have a problem. I want to just understand how it kicks in. So in your example, Trader Joe's is $2.79. They're $6.99 and $8.99. If Trader Joe's goes up to $4.99, they are still lower than the established market, but their set price was $2.79, and they've gone up more than a sixth. So because the market base is higher, is that not ONA? And does that factor into that
correct
determination of whether it's ONA or not?
Correct. That's a true statement. In other words, market conditions will dictate the price. And you can't charge ONA when a person is, again, what happens if Trader Joe's wholesaler says, I'm sorry, I can't sell them to you at this number. I got to raise the price, and they go to $4.99. Now, they may be less than everybody else in the market, but they're reacting to what their wholesaler, again, coming from the farm or whatever. So those fluctuations in the marketplace are not ONA. That doesn't qualify as ONA. But at the same time, the fact that he's selling it at $2.79, even though it's 1 dozen, I mean, again, I don't buy more than 1 dozen at a time. Is it worth my while to go to the Trader Joe's? Might be a little bit out of my way, but I'm going to pay $6 less for eggs. Maybe it's good, right? So those are the questions I think that this Gemara is dealing with. Okay, now, so we now understand the theory of the Chachamim as to why they say that they're more liberal and you can take advantage, right? Now, what was the next case in the Mishnah about the beans? And so again, he said that you can't take the skin off the beans, and the Chachamim say yes. Why? Man Chachamim. So who is this Chachamim? Who is the leader of the Chachamim that says all of these things? Says the Gemara of Acha. Rav Acha is the head of the Chachamim, the Tanya. We learned the Brisa of Acha Mater Bedova Haniro. So here, Rav Acha says that as a general rule, when it comes to the public, if you do something that enhances the product, it enhances the product. The public has a choice. Public can say, the public can't necessarily dictate to you, oh, you enhance the product, you should only be entitled to $1, not $2. That says Rav Acha you can't do. So now you have a choice. It's not as if it's a surreptitious raising of the price, kind of like Kalash Yad, and we don't know what it is. But if you raise the price, you know why I'm charging you for? Take a look at this bean. This bean is now pristine. All you have to do is put it in the pot and cook it. You don't have to spend a half an hour cleaning. I'm charging you $2 for that. Abishol says it's not worth $2. It's worth $1. The Chacham say he can charge $10. As long as the public sees a value in what you've done, it's okay. If the public says not worth $10, they won't pay it. If the public says $4, it's a little expensive, but look what it does. It saves me a lot of time. Then the Chachamim Amatir. The Chachamim say that as long as a person is full, that's what's called full disclosure. As long as you have full disclosure and you say, this is my price, that's it. Now the guy can come back and say, I'll buy a larger amount, sell it me a lower price. But that's all mekach and memker. That's all negotiation. The fact of the matter is that he's not cheating anyone because he's out in the open and saying, I'm charging you more because I did this. Yeah, and you can't dictate to me that my labor is worth $1. I say it's worth $2. So that's the reason why the Chachamim are mati here, is because he's upfront. He's not dealing surreptitiously, so that he's charging someone for something that they don't have. Okay. Now the last part of the Mishnah says that you can't beautify in order to deceive. What does that mean? Okay, so apparently what they used to do with behemoths is that they would take a brush, and that they would with the brush, they would brush the hair of the animal, right, so that it stands up, right? And apparently, with that, the appearance is that it's a better looking cow. They know from back for volume, and this was unfortunately something that years ago was done even in the Jewish community, is that they would inflate the interior of the animal one way or the other to make it look fatter. And it wasn't. It was bogus. In other words, if you feed the animal and it's a bigger animal, okay, fine. But to artificially, as he calls it, Mafarsky calls it beautifying. But it's not only beautifying; it's also deceiving the public to think that the animal that they're buying is more than it is. They ensure there's a bus of buying, and also you can't soak meat in water because it makes it look better. So these are all deceptive practices. I'm sure there's many others. The Gemara is just giving us an example of what you can't do because that's deceptive.
But Rabbi, when farmers who raise chickens or ducks or geese,
Yeah,
they fatten them. I mean, they overfeed them. They want them to be as big as possible so that
correct.
you get them. So they're expanding them so that the weight is more, so they can charge more for the animal. That still goes on today.
But the animal is bigger.
But then
In
you
other
can
words,
actually weigh it and see the
Right,
difference. Here,
right.
this is literally skin deep.
it's artificially making the animal look bigger. If it's bigger, then it's bigger. I mean, whether or not that's a practice that is we should do is stuffing an animal. I know that there's an expression in Yiddish that they used to what's called Stopgans. They used to take a goose and they used to force feed it to make it right. That was the practice. But you're buying something bigger. In other words, you're getting the benefit. It may not be good for the animal, but you're getting the benefit of it. And we're talking about the buying and selling.
So this is limited to appearance that is not real, but trying
Correct.
to.
That's what he means by beautifying it to make it look better than it is. If I take a piece of meat, apparently I wasn't aware, if you take it and soak it in water, I mean, we used to soak it because for salt, okay.
Right.
But if you soak it and make it look nicer, and it's still the same meat, that's deceptive. Okay.
The classic thing that where if you go to a supermarket, they try to make the ground beef look red, not bloody red, but bright red, because people think that's fresher and better.
That's a better, right.
Even though in reality, it turns out it's just a question of the oxygen and stuff, and then how they seal it. And so they sort of tweak it to make it look that way. Within a day or two, it's going to turn browner anyway, but it's not any less healthy. It's not spoiled or anything else, but they're doing it literally just to make it look
attractive. Yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes they only do it on the top and then the bottom is not that way. So you can see it and it's still done today.
But that's what the Mishnah says, that you shouldn't skin the beans on the top and leave the unskinned beans on the bottom because you're deceiving. Right. That's in fact what you're saying, right? You're going to leave the less desirable meat on the bottom and put the more desirable meat on the top. And you're going to say, oh, I'm selling it for $2 a pound more because look how beautiful this meat is. So those things you can't do. Now, says the Gemara weiter, my aid misharbetin. So what does it mean in that brisa when it says that you take a comb and you comb the animal's hair and make it look nicer? So he says that our Gemara explained that there's two different interpretations of what that means. One says it doesn't mean that you actually comb the hair. It means that you gave the animal something to eat, which made it look more attractive. Apparently, they were able to give the animals certain foods which would make their hair stand up. And
they do that with some fish, where they'll have it eat certain things to change the color of the fish.
Correct, right. So one interpretation is that it doesn't mean you're combing it; it means you're giving him something to ingest. And Ziri, Omar Rav Kana Mizikafta, Ziri says in Rav Kana's name that it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with actually combing the hair of the animal to make it look more attractive. I mean, an animal that where you don't attend to it, it could be a very good animal, but its curb appeal isn't the same. When you have an animal that is pristine and its hair is combed and it looks nice and fat, that will enhance the opportunity. And he says, but that's not real. So that's deceptive. Okay. So
excuse me, but today you have a lot of people buying used things, whether it's a car or lawnmowers. You have all of these social media sites that sell, Facebook Marketplace and all of that.
Right.
People will typically, when it comes to used cars, they get it detailed by somebody for $100, $200, and it looks like beautiful, brand new.
Correct.
But it's just on the surface. You don't know. I mean, so you can cover up a lot of mechanical
problems. That's deceptive.
By basically making it look prettier. So at what point, how do you set a starting point when it comes to used items? what's the normal starting point in terms of condition? It's the way
think
it is when you start.
So the lesson here is, okay, you want to sell it and make it look attractive, but as long as you're being upfront and saying, listen, this is a 5-year-old car. It's detailed, it looks nice, but it's a 5-year-old car. So now that the buyer has to look at it and say, okay, I know that they spit polished and it looks great, but what does the rest of it look like? So just because you're cleaning it up doesn't necessarily, in the case of the animal, for instance, where you're combing it to make it look what it isn't, that's deceptive. Because a person will look and say, oh, this is a nice fat cow, but in reality, he's not seeing it correctly, because the fact that he's beautifying it makes it more than it is. If you're selling a used item, a lawnmower or something else, then again, you have to be upfront. And once you're upfront, even if you've detailed it and cleaned it and make it look nice, but as long as you're not deceiving by saying, oh, this lawnmower is only a year or two old, but in fact it's 5 years old. And so if a person is not a mumcha, he's not a baki, and he looks at it, and look, today, I don't know if they did at the time, today they give you a warranty, they tell you, if it's not good within a year, I'll fix it, take it back. So again, you have to be sort of scrupulous. There isn't one rule that tells us how a seller should behave, but the common practice is that yes, you can increase its appearance to the point where it will have curb appeal, but beyond that, you shouldn't deceive the public.
But Rabbi, combing an animal's hair, I mean, we know that they're show dogs that are sold.
Right.
And they're primped when they're sold, but they know, it's a matter of they're purebred and they want to look as nice as possible.
Right.
It's the same thing with a horse or even cattle. You don't want them to look like, I'm not saying you give them a permanent, but you want them to look good so that you can get max value. But that's not deceiving.
But Michael, you have a lame horse that you can't really run very well, and you're primping him, and the horse looks gorgeous, and a person comes along and says, okay, I like this horse, it's beautiful and everything else, but he doesn't know that it has an inherent defect, and the seller doesn't disclose it.
But if I'm a buyer of a horse, I'm going to want that horse to trot to make sure that it can. So I'm going to take that horse out. If I'm not just going to take based on its looks and say this is a beautiful horse. If I want it as a workhorse or a donkey or an ox,
but
the fact that I comb the hair on its mane doesn't mean that I'm primping it.
Well, you're right in your example, but let me give you another example. What happens if you know that this horse literally runs out of gas after a half a mile? And you say, okay, this is a beautiful horse. You present it in such a way where a buyer's attracted to it. He looks, again, he's a mumcha. He looks at the hoofs, he looks here, he looks there. He takes it for a trot or a walk. Everything looks great. Then he brings it home and he starts riding, or he gives it to kids to ride. And in a half a mile, the horse stops, can't go anymore. So you've done your due diligence to the extent that you can, but the owner is deceiving you because he's not telling you the underlying truth.
But do you have recourse in Based In to come back and challenge them?
Yes, absolutely.
So that's, it's buyer beware, it's
buyer beware.
Who buy these animals are knowledgeable, or they hire someone who's knowledgeable in evaluating whether they're there or not. But to say that you can't make it look good for sale is just, that's ridiculous.
So I think that this Mishnah is really focused on beautifying to cover up the warts where a person wouldn't buy this animal or this person or this lawnmower if it wasn't spit polished and clean. So it's the deception that is the objection here. Sell it in its natural condition and tell everybody it's a great car. It's not spit polished clean, but it works. In other words, it's the deception of the appearance that the Chachamim.
But you're trying to make it look as good as possible. We see that. I mean, I'm going to go back and not name
no.
names,
As
but
good
we
as
go back
possible.
20, 25 years ago when there was gefilte fish that was sold on Pesach that had salmonella that was doctored up to look beautiful, and people suffered from it. And I don't think there was any recourse. I mean, they could return it for their price back, but it's a matter of as Jay said before, where do you draw the line?
Where you draw the line.
Here's the starting points. I mean, I guess the question is if somebody has a lawnmower that will run for a half hour, but it won't go for an hour, the starting point is known to the owner, but the owner doesn't always know everything about their own product even.
No.
When does where's the line that says deception beyond that, besides not revealing stuff that you do know? When does this deception start? Okay.
I think, what's important
in regular business.
Yeah, in the regular business, a seller should know his product. And he can only know what he knows. I mean, there's something called latent defect. A latent defect is a defect that is not known, that only comes out later, but the seller didn't know it. He didn't deceive the person because he didn't know it. It was latent. It took time, and then the defect would materialize. So that's a separate story. I think what we're really getting at here is that a product is not what you are saying it is, but because you enhance its appearance, you beautify it, you're covering up the deception that you know to be the case. So without looking at it, whether it's a horse or a lawnmower or a car, the fact of the matter is that if it wasn't enhanced in appearance, and again, red dye number 2 or whatever they use, that's a deception that they're using in order for people to buy something that they wouldn't otherwise buy if it didn't look in that color. I mean, that's the reality, and that's why there's such a controversy over it. Because it may not be healthy, but in halacha, it's a deceptive practice. So I think this question, it is a fine line. I'm not going to say there isn't a fine line here. And again, when there's a dispute, you go to Bezdin, and Bezdin has to evaluate whether or not the person intentionally did it. And if he didn't intentionally do it, then it may not be awesome. But again, in this Mishnah, we're dealing with the deception of making appearances look better than they are, so that you can make a transaction for an amount of money that you wouldn't otherwise get. That's the general rule. So in this machlokes, we see that that you have to be very, very careful. And you can certainly make an animal look nice, but you can't make an animal look nice. And therefore, because you make it look nice, it'll appear to be bigger, fatter, heavier, which maybe that's the case. What the Gemara is saying, that when they did that, the animal looked heavier and bigger. And someone will say, for that animal, I'll pay you $100. If the hair wasn't nicely done, or whatever this drink is that they're talking about that inflates the intestine or the interior of the animal wouldn't look that way. So he'd give him $80, not $100. So that Gemara says is a deceptive practice, and I'll agree, Michael. Sometimes it's a fine line between what is acceptable and is not. It's not. This is general rules. The specific rules. That's why we have a bezin. That's why we have the ability to say I was deceived. So now the Gemara is just going to give us a couple of examples of what is acceptable, what is okay in business. So just to give us some sense, here we learn all these things that aren't okay. So Shmuel, Shora Lamirma Tume Lasarbala. So Shmuel, they would put a coat on top of an animal, and then they would attach silk, what do they call them, like tzitzis, fringes, on the animal, and they would parade the animal, and the animal looks beautiful. Okay, so he says Shmuel, that's not improper. I mean, to take a coat, put it over it, and make it look pretty, that doesn't take away from the buyer looking at the animal, not at the accoutrement, not at the silk jacket. Rabbi Yehuda Sharlo Tusei Karame. Rabbi Yehuda permitted that they allowed them to wash Tusei Karme to wash the clothing again to make it look attractive. Same principle. Rabbi Shara Lemidak Tzurari. And so Rabba would pound the let's say he was selling a carpet, and he would pound it and pound it and pound it. So apparently, when you do that, it stretches the carpet. It makes it look nicer. So again, he says that's not a deceptive practice because again, that's what people do. I mean, you want to make it look either bigger or nicer, you have to pound it. But that's somebody in other words, you're not doing something that isn't in the public. When you're beautifying, you're deceiving because the public doesn't know. But when you're doing something that apparently is the norm and you're doing it in order to sell it, that's not improper. Rabbi Sharla Tzlume Girei. So I'm not sure what this really gets at. But Rava says that you can color, girei is arrows, that you can color arrows. I guess maybe they sold bows and arrows, and the arrows were of a better color. Papa Bashmul Sherla Slume Dikule, Rav Papa said it was okay to sell colored or painted baskets. So again, this is an example of things that you're not cheating anybody because you're not covering up. And maybe that's the right word here. You're not covering up. If you sell something, an arrow is an arrow, and you sell it and you paint it blue or green or yellow, someone may say, oh, I like that. I'm partial to the color green or yellow. I'm going to buy that arrow. But you haven't deceived him. It's still an arrow. So I think the point of all of these is that what you're doing is you're not deceiving by doing something to the animal or covering up. So a person then can't taina, oh, you sold me something improper. Why? Because I sold you a cow that had a jacket on with attractive finishes or colors. I didn't deceive you. I mean, you have to look at the animal and decide what it is. So again, that's the chiluk I think that the Gemara is making. Now,
but Rabbi,
yeah.
Wouldn't you say, though, that if you're buying something, if you don't know what you're looking at, well, it's your responsibility to know what you want. You know, in other words, what did I say? Caveat emptor, that the buyer beware.
Buyer beware, yeah.
If you're buying it, I mean, you don't send a novice or somebody that's totally inexperienced to buy something.
That's exactly the point. I think that's exactly the point. The Gemara is saying, the Gemara is saying is that we can't protect you from yourself. When you go to buy something, you have to know what you're buying. The seller isn't deceiving by coloring something. It makes it look attractive. So you'll come in, oh, I like a green basket. Otherwise, it would be just a plain, a brown or gray. He made it nice because he painted it blue. Okay, if you like blue and it's a blue basket, you'll buy it. But you're buying the basket because it's blue, but it's still a quality basket. That's not deception. The difference is...
No, that's not correct, though, because look, I can go out and buy a Mercedes, and that could look, people that have a Mercedes, they're out there waxing it and washing it every day. It looks beautiful, but the engine is of no use.
That's deceptive. That's deceptive, David. That's deceptive. Because there you're beautifying it. That's the case before where it says that you can't color or you can't beautify for the purpose of deceiving. But if you're not deceiving because it's plain on its face, a cow with a coat that has nice finishes is still a cow. And if again, we can't protect you against yourself.
In effect, though, you're basically deceiving because
who are you deceiving?
I mean, the seller deceives things because he's working on the psychology of how you react when you see something freshly painted. I mean, that's why when it comes to houses, they always the real estate people always say, paint the house.
Right.
Clean the windows, paint the house, put a
Well,
beautiful
not only
finish.
bake the house, they say you should bake cookies and leave them in the kitchen. Is that deceptive? If you're baking cookies and a person comes in and the aroma is wonderful, they have a good feeling about the house.
Yeah.
The house is still a house. You've got to
Question is
examine the
whether,
house.
but are you operating on the psychology of what you know that how people will
And that's not
react?
awesome. Jay, that's not awesome.
That's
That's
not
not forbidden. Is to you play on someone's feelings, but lamaisa, as a practical matter, what you're selling is what you're selling. You're not hiding what you're selling. You're creating an environment which someone would want to buy your
put on
product.
music. You put on music to make the buyers
Exactly.
in an
Exactly.
open house. You put on some music so everything is calm and so on and so forth. So that is not deception per se, I would think.
No, not deception. Correct. Now, so we see so frankly, Gemara Va'anan Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, a mafarshkin los odomus of Amos Kalim. In other words, to your point, Jay, we just learned that you can't beautify an animal or a keli or whatever. And here, what are these people doing? They're beautifying. As a practical matter, they're beautifying because they're making it look better. We know what the answer is, but that's the kasha. The kasha is we just said you can't beautify, and you're beautifying. And for the Gemara, like kasha, it's not a kasha. And this is the key point: is that if you're selling something that, with or without the color, it has. Let's say, as an example, a car up to 2 years from when you buy it is considered more or less a new car. I'm just making it up. But if it's more than 2 years old, then it's considered a used car, an older car. So what you do is you paint it, you beautify it, and you say, look at this beautiful new car. And the person says, wow, look at this car. You deceived him because by beautifying it, you're undermining what it really is. So the Gemara says, if you're involved with something that's new, something new, and you enhance its appearance, that's okay. So you take a basket is a basket, it's utilitarian, you can use it, it's nice, and you beautify it, that's not awesome. But you take something that's old or used or already, battered and bruised, that's what beautifying cannot do. So he's making a chilik. All these cases that we gave, half a dozen cases of where it was permitted to do certain things, he's saying, if it's new, it's okay. If it's old and you're just covering up by beautifying, that's not okay. So in other words, we have kind of a chilik here between when beautification is acceptable, when it doesn't really change the underlying object, it just, like you say, it's mood music, it's aroma, it's something else. That the Gemara doesn't say you can't do. You have to be the judge of your own character, whether or not you're going to be swayed. Oh, because it looks so nice and I like the environment, I'm going to buy it. What about the product? Is the product what you want? So we have to put the onus not completely on the seller. Seller has his duty, but the buyer has a duty also to know what he's buying. Okay, so let's just finish up. The final stretch of the Gemara is Pirkus to Oda Mayi. What does it mean to beautify a man? We talk about an Eved. He can give it. There was an elderly person who was selling himself, an Eved Kanani, selling himself as a slave. Also, Zigna, he went ahead and he dyed his hair. He dyed his hair, he dyed his beard. So now he looks 10 years younger, 20 years younger. Also, Lekame de Rava. So he came before Rava, and he knew that Rava was in the market to get some help. On Malay, he said to Rava, Zivnin, buy me. I will work for you. And Rava would look at him and say, oh, this is a strong, healthy, younger man. He would buy him. On Malay, so Rava said to him, there's a pasuk in Mishlei, Yanim b'nei beisecha, that let Aniyim, meaning Jewish Aniyim, be part of your house, and don't look to buy an Evet Kanani. So there is such a pasuk. Of course, it's not binding. So the Rabbi quoted this pasuk. He says, "Yes, I need help, but I'd rather get an oni who will work for me rather than buying a non-Jewish slave." Okay, so he didn't buy. Also, the comment of Papa Bar Shmuel, he came before a Papa Rav Shmuel, and he said, "Zavne." He says, "Buy me. I'll work for you." And he bought him. Yom Echad Omalei. One day, Rav Papa said to him, "Ashke Maya, please bring me some water to drink." Also, so then the slave, the Evet Kanani, washed out his hair and his beard to make him look like he did, like he really was. Amalei, and he said to Rav Papa, "Look, I'm older than your father. Is it appropriate for you to ask me to bring you water? I'm an older person."
Mhm.
Right? So he deceived him. Korea nafshe. So Rav Papa said of himself, Sadik, and this is the pasuk he quoted, Sadik mitzora nechlatz, a Sadik should be saved from tzara, v'yover achatachtav, and someone else will come in his place. What did he mean? That the slave went to Rava, and Rava said, "I'm not buying you because there's a pasuk that I should rather employ Jewish aniyim than buy a slave." Then you came to me, and I said yes. Now look what's happened. So he quotes the pasuk of Mishlei that it's. I don't want to use this phrase, but the phrase that we use is like there's a fool born every day, right? If it's not you, it'll be somebody else. I won't hap you, but I'll hap someone else because there's always someone out there who will be gullible. So I don't mean that here, but Rav Papa is saying the pasuk tzaddik mitzora nachlat, a real tzaddik is saved from his own sorrows. Why? Someone will come behind him and take away that situation. So Rava was saved. If it had happened to Rava would have been the one who would have been stuck with a slave who doesn't want to serve him. So Papa said of himself that, again, what's the point? The point of this Gemara is to give us an example of what beautification can do and why it's awesome. Because it really, this is an extreme case where the guy said, "Well, I'm an old man. You want me to give you water?" Yeah, but you presented yourself as a younger person who's capable. And that's why I bought you. So what is the guy going to say? Tough luck. That is improper. That is totally improper. But when you enhance something that the underlying characteristic is the same as it was, and again, in Mecca Hamemper, Jewish merchants have to just be careful. Many of them aren't because they don't follow the halacha. Is that you have to be very careful in what you do when you sell a product. Is that you have to be fair, and there are times when the price is high because of good reasons. It's a shortage and this and that and the other. For instance, I don't know if there's a halacha here, but there's a lot of grumbling by what El Al did during the last October 7th aftermath, and they announced that they made billions of dollars. So now, again, it happens to be that the underlying owners of El Al are now frum people. It's a frum group that I'm aware of that bought El Al. So now, is there a question of whether or not they gouge the public? Because,
wow.
right?
I know the numbers.
That's
I know the numbers.
What's that?
I know the numbers when I was looking to go to Eretz Yisrael, but we
right.
canceled that. Compared to United and the others that were still flying, they were unbelievable prices.
They'll argue. Listen, no one else took the risk. Of course, we were the other one flying, but we took the risk.
No, when there were others, when there was competition with United, the price difference was enormous between.
Correct.
Which they jacked it up.
But so this is the question of the halacha.
Right.
Is this circumstance enough for a firm person to say, I am charging 3 times, 4 times, whatever it is, the price that normally would be paid because I'm taking a risk? Again, that's a question that a best.
But United was taking the same risk.
Was that
the price difference at the time when you had more than El Al flying,
Right.
United was a comparison from Newark to Tel Aviv, the same flight path, everything the same, and you had like I remember it was like 15,000 for two people on business class. At the same time, El Al was charging 20,000. The same airplane model, the same seats, the same business, everything was the same. It was an enormous jack up of the price.
Okay. Again, that may be more a case of you have alternatives, right? You have alternatives. You can go fly with United. You want to fly with El Al because it's a Jewish airline. You feel more comfortable. You feel safer, whatever the reason. So that I don't see as much of an issue because you have a Brera. But when you don't have a Brera, you have only one flying, and their taina is, listen, we're the only ones flying.
Yeah.
And but look at the circumstance. Everybody else bowed out because it was not safe. What is the price of safety? Again, I'm not making a judgment. I'm just saying this would be the argument. Can someone jack the price up so substantially because they're taking a risk, or their insurance went up, whatever the case? But maybe their insurance was exorbitant. They have to pass the price through to the consumer, which happens all the time. When insurance prices go up, you have no brainer. That because you're in the middle here. So it's just a question. I don't know that anybody has challenged them. Again, they're from people, but at the same time, you ask yourself, is that a legitimate business practice? So we can go back and forth on these issues, but I think the Gemara is basically giving us a rule, and that is that you can't cover up. If something is legitimate and you want to enhance it, that's okay. But when something isn't so legitimate, for whatever the reason, because it's old, because it has defects, which you want to hide by beautifying, then you're crossing the line from a business practice to an improper business practice. And that's how the Gemara, I think, is giving us this understanding what the chiluk is and why, again, and as we've all spoken here, there are a lot of gray areas. And some of those gray areas are difficult to ascertain. That's why you get a psak. You're going to get a psak, and the psak really balances all of the issues. And at the end of the day, you get a halacha. Either you go to a rav or you go to a bezin, whatever the case may be. But we see that the Gemara and the Torah itself, these all quoted from Psukim, that the Gemara was very sensitive to how people dealt with the public, and was very careful not to allow business practices that
we should assume in that one example I gave you before United stopped flying is that
right.
These from people, and you assume they learned this Gemara, and they have reasons why they have to charge that price.
If
backed up with data.
If that's the case, and they were airless, and they said, you know what, we're not just going to gouge the public, but we have to balance our interests. And we're taking a risk, we're paying more for insurance and everything else. We need to make more money. And otherwise we'll be like United, we'll close shop. I mean,
you want to stay in business.
You want to stay in business.
Low compared to their real expenses at the time.
Exactly. And that's something that the public doesn't know. I don't know of any challenges to El Al. Again, some people don't know. They're from people, but there's been no challenges because everybody kind of says, okay, they took advantage of the market. They were the only ones flying, and so they quadrupled the price. That's it. But it's not that simple. When there are some times when it's legitimate to raise the price, but again, we see from here that even when you raise the price, you can raise it by $1 because you clean the beans, not $2 because $2 is excessive.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of back and forth that the Gemara tells us. So Hadna Loch Hazov, Baruch Hashem, we finished Perek Hazov. It had a wide range of interesting issues, a lot of Agadata, and also a lot of halacha. And Mitzvah next week we're going to start Eza Neshech. Eza Neshech deals primarily with the question of ribis, which is a very important concept in Jewish law. And we're going to see circumstances when what we call ribis is okay, and when ribis isn't okay. It's not just simply you can't charge interest. I mean, across the board. I'm going to see the halachas as to what applies. And this probably is much more practical to most of us because you don't have to be in business. I mean, someone comes to you for a loan and you lend them money. Now you have a choice. I mean, on the surface, you lend them with interest. You don't lend them with interest. You need your money, but this way you'll get something back on your money. These are all important questions that the Torah certainly has a very specific word, and the Gemara will start Mitzvah Shem next week to pick up on that.
Shalom.